Hello everyone, welcome back to another What I've Been Playing. I just recently finished Ni No Kuni II, Revenant Kingdom. On the PlayStation 4, a level 5 RPG, a company that I've always really enjoyed ever since Dark Cloud launched on the PS2. It was one of the first big RPGs on that platform. And this is a game that I've always wanted to get into, but there was always something else that I was playing at the time. I finally gave it a shot because I loved the first one. Ni No Kuni Wrath of the White Witch is probably my favorite overall PlayStation 3 game. It was fantastic. I'm a big fan of Studio Ghibli and their movies, and I loved that element, and mixed with a lot of the familiar level 5 designs from especially games like Rogue Galaxy, had a lot of familiar feeling of one of their RPGs mixed with the Studio Ghibli magic. And I knew going in that Revenant Kingdom was something a little different, and that Studio Ghibli was no longer as heavily involved. We don't have any of those movie quality animated scenes from them within here, but it still keeps within their style of art and takes place in the same world, just very far in the future. And some gameplay changes. It's more of an action RPG that actually feels a little bit almost, I'd say almost, but not quite as fluid or fighting game feeling as a Tales game. Again, it reminds me a little more of Rogue Galaxy, but I feel like the combat was much better in that earlier level 5 game, and gets rid of that sort of Pokemon mechanic that was in the first Ni No Kuni. And overall, that change provided something different to the experience, but didn't feel quite as interesting. And that's something that flowed through the entire experience, where I enjoyed the entire game. There wasn't really anything that I felt was tedious or boring or poorly made, but the overall experience still felt a little lacking. It was very devoid of the charm and magic of, and the life feel of Ni No Kuni. Even within the towns you go into it, everything felt less alive, less animated. The NPCs felt a little more static. The environments felt a little less imaginative. Everything felt very kind of generic JRPG. A well-made, because it's just a company that, to my eyes, has always made fantastic RPGs. A well-made RPG, but fairly standard. Nothing really that set it apart in the overall plot and the setting and the exploration of that world and the general combat. Just in all of those elements, even the music, some themes and things are borrowed from the first game, a lot are new. Everything about it just felt like a really well-made kind of generic JRPG. Fun, but nothing that would ever be a favorite of mine. And the one thing that helped it stand out a bit is the stuff surrounding Evan and his rise, trying to form a new kingdom after a coup in the beginning of the game, and the kingdom management and growth elements, as well as these skirmishes. But those all had the same issue, where the idea of forming your own kingdom and placing and building and growing these different facilities within your kingdom and bringing new people in to help run them and level them up and create new technologies and spells and whatever, the kingdom growth element was fun, but felt overly simple and just really little generic, even though it was still fun to do. And the same thing with these skirmishes, taking these units through something that feels like a very watered-down version of the first Kessen game that launched with the PS2. It has a similar feel in the control elements to that, just much more simplified, and those, to me, just didn't have the level of strategy that I would want from them, or action. They just felt, again, a little too simplified, a little too dull, even though adding these elements did give it a bit of an identity in comparison to the first game. The one thing that I do think they did a great job with, the one thing that I'll definitely say as a compliment, is how you bring new citizens into this growing kingdom is through the side quests, where you will find someone and then either do like a fetch quest or defeat an enemy or do something, solve a mystery, whatever. With this character, the reward is then they will move and become a new citizen in your kingdom, and that is a great way of tying these very standard structured side quests into something that feels a little more rewarding than simply completing the quest, getting some experience and some gold or an item or whatever. It actually is tied into a different element of the game and made that more interesting and made me want to do more of those quests, and it made those NPCs feel a little more like characters. You're a little more involved when they were then a part of your kingdom. So the side quest structure, tying that in, I think elevated what otherwise would have been the same exact type of side quests I've played in 100 other RPGs. So overall, I don't want to come across, it's weird, I don't want to come across as too negative with Ni No Kuni 2, because I did really enjoy it. It is a good experience if you've played the first one, and go ahead and play this. It is a fun, solid RPG. It's just nothing really special. It's somewhat forgettable overall. It feels, everything about it feels just a little bit more like something I've played so many times before, and any element that is a little different, that brings a little more personality into it, feels a little lackluster, a little underwhelming. And I think the one thing that gave me that feeling a little bit more was being a direct, being a sequel to a much better game that just, I feel like the characters had so much more personality. The world felt so much more creative. Everything felt a little more lifeless with Ni No Kuni 2 in comparison to the first one. I don't know how much of that was the difference in the Studio Ghibli involvement, what the reasoning was behind that. But even, again, just like walking around a town or an environment, everything felt so much more static and generic within this, but the general art style adding a little bit of a layer of creativity to make it stand out. So overall, it was a fun game. I'm glad I played it. It's just one I'm less likely to revisit again in the future. I'd love to hear what your thoughts are if you've ever played Ni No Kuni 2, Revenant Kingdom. A little disappointing, but still fun. I don't really do the number rating thing anymore, but I like between a 7 and an 8. Again, it's very well made. Everything is just kind of by the numbers, though, versus what I would consider to be a modern classic JRPG. So, good game overall, but not quite the experience that could live up to the first one.